The government's piling the pressure on councils to sign off house building on a scale not seen in many decades.
Well, I've got 1.5 million homes being built.
Many councils have been told they must double their existing plans to build new homes. If the government targets are met, house building will rocket above recent completions in England, on average by 60%.
Are we going to push away the planning rules and make them clearer, as we've done today? Get away the blockers that are stopping the housing being built? Yes, we absolutely intend. For years, we've had not enough houses being built. That means that individuals and families don't have the security that they want.
Under the government's newly published plans, councils must develop house building plans that meet the new higher targets set by the government. Councils must identify what the government calls grey belt land, low-grade green belt that could be developed without great loss. Any green belt land will be considered for development if that's judged necessary.
Of course we want to get the balance right with nature and the environment, but if it comes to a human being wanting to have a house for them and their family, that has to be the top priority.
Over the decades, the town of Sittingbourne in Kent has already crept out over some of the fields that surround it. But for some local residents, the current development plan for new homes goes way beyond that.
These fields here would be obliterated with development and a road going all the way round across the village here, across the neighbouring villages over to the national park.
8,400 houses, so that's about 20,000 people. It's a town. People are calling it a garden village. It's a garden town.
The Borough Council here got a taster of the government's approach to planning when it got a letter from Angela Rayner 3 hours before it was about to vote to block the development on the edge of Sittingbourne.
The Secretary of State had called in these applications. As such, the committee has had the power to make a decision on this application ripped out of its hands at the 11th hour.
Labour in coalition leads the council here and voted against the plans to build on these fields.
The only bits in my constituency are right up here.
But the brand new Labour MP backs the new development.
Well, I think that if I'm honest, the way that it's gone in the last few years, nothing gets built in this country.
You've got a very slim majority, 355?
Yes.
Do you feel you're taking a bit of a risk backing this development?
I am not going to get re-elected. The government won't get re-elected if we don't deliver the change that's needed. And honestly, right there in Sittingbourne and Sheppey, if we don't actually deliver, show that we're actually producing the homes people need, that we're actually doing things that will bring the public services.
Might as well give up.
It's making him really, really unpopular. He's going to have a real struggle getting re-elected in 4.5 years' time.
Some critics of the government's new approach say ministers should be putting more pressure on developers to build on land they're sitting on. And they argue the government won't get housing for the poorest without government money.
They're just chasing a big number without thinking through the consequences. They're putting all their eggs in one basket with planning. Quite frankly, it's much broader than that.
We will see very few affordable homes in this development. What we need is not executive homes, which is what they want to build. It's going back to old-fashioned council housing. It's social housing.
The government's got to dig into its own pockets.
Yes, we need to see social housing.
Otherwise it won't happen.
Exactly, because developers don't make enough money out of that type of housing. They're not interested.
The government's told councils they have 12 weeks to come up with a timetable for new, much bigger house building plans, as the clock already ticks on a government target it acknowledges is hugely ambitious.
Well, joining me here is Lizzie Bundred-Woodward, a planning policy manager at the Campaign to Protect Rural England, and in Leeds, Sam Stafford, who's planning director of the Home Builders Federation. Lizzie Bundred-Woodward first. The last time a government built 300,000 homes a year was back in 1969. Do you accept that mandatory targets are needed because otherwise young people simply can't get on the housing ladder?
So CPRE are really pleased that Labour government are grasping the challenge. They understand the scale of the challenge in terms of the housing crisis. However, targets for councils don't actually lead to homes being built out on the ground.
Well, they're not being built at the moment, so they've got to do something.
Absolutely, and setting these big targets is good, and it's good to have ambition, but we need to see affordable homes being built, and that's primarily the issue. The government's announcements today, there's no clear direction of travel in terms of actually building homes that young people like myself can afford.
But you're worried about the number of homes being built and what area they're being built, and it's urban sprawl all over again.
We are concerned that there are going to be there's going to be nibbling away at the Greenbelt, and really what we want to see is a brownfield first approach. So we want to see urban regeneration, regenerating our dilapidated town centres. Post-COVID, many of us are used to seeing empty shops boarded up. Let's bring those shops back into use first before building on Greenfield.
Right. Sam Stafford, nibbling away at the Greenbelt, that's the problem. You know, I've heard it described today as the worst sprawl since the 50s. Do you accept that is what is going to happen now?
I think that's somewhat of an over-exaggeration, Cathy, if I may say. I think the government should be applauded for grasping two nettles that the previous government didn't do. One is that if we are going to build 300,000 homes a year, we need to plan for 300,000 homes a year, excuse me. And the calculation for doing that under the last government got to about 240 in practical effect, and we're building about 240. So in dealing with that national ambition, it gives us, you know, more than a reasonable chance of actually getting there. And the government have opened a conversation about building on the Greenbelt, which is necessary in the longer term because there just isn't enough capacity within urban areas to meet housing need. And these are only really the sites that should be allocated in local plans if local authorities got round to adopting a local plan. You know, this is not a presumption in favour of development, it's a presumption in favour of sustainable development. Right.
Lizzie, you know, nibbling away at the Greenbelt, you said, but there you heard from Sam that the Greenbelt needs to be built on to deliver these kind of numbers. And they are saying brownfield first, government, aren't they?
Unfortunately, CPRE completely disagree, and we have research to show that there is sufficient brownfield land available across the country to build 1.2 million homes. We think that's a really good start in meeting the government's ambition for 1.5 million. Where Greenbelt should be released, it should be released as part of a local plan process, and it should be strategically released, not on a site-by-site basis.
Well, what about if you answer that point about the brownfield, that you could almost get there by building on brownfield, Sam?
The last calculation I saw, Cathy, was a couple of years ago, and it was 1.4 million homes if you added up every single site on every local authority's brownfield register. But over the longer term, and planning is about the longer term, that gets you to about a third of the requirement over a 15-year period. And brownfield first, yes, you know, absolutely. The government consulted recently on what brownfield passports may be in order to expedite the development of vacant sites in towns and cities, and that's to be encouraged. But as I say, it just won't get us anywhere near, and it won't give the plurality of choice in the market to significantly increase supply. Because if the government is going to get anywhere near 1.5 million homes, we need planning permissions in very short order. And they need to be lots of planning permissions on lots of sizes of sites in different locations.
But Sam, the grey belt, as Keir Starmer calls it, is actually the old green belt, isn't it? And, you know, it's straying very far from Keir Starmer's original definition of disused petrol stations, isn't it?
That is true. Grey belt is to be defined as land that's in the green belt and making a limited contribution to three of the tests of Greenbelt. Now, as I said before, arguably, if authorities like, for example, Swale was the authority featured in Gary's piece, that doesn't like, or the councillors were about to, you know, vote down a planning application for major development. So councillors don't like that development, but they have had ample opportunity to put a local plan in place on sites and land that they do like.
Right.
And
well, let me
like
put that back to Lizzie. I mean, if the councils are wise, they can use the brownfield sites and the disused petrol stations, as Keir Starmer defined it. They don't have to build on the green belt, do they? It's down to the councils.
It's in some areas, absolutely, and in other areas, not so much, and we really think that this centralisation of the planning system is a challenge, and actually planning should be locally specific. It should be a democratic process. But the grey belt, I think, and CPRE think, is really masking a larger issue, that the homes being delivered just are not affordable for people. the government really need to grasp the nettle and set affordable housing targets. And we're really disappointed that they've reneged on the 50% affordable housing commitment that they had promised on the Grey Belt in the summer.
We'll have to discuss that a whole different occasion. Lizzie Bundred-Woodward and Sam Stafford, thank you both very much.